Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our afternoon panel. And we've got a great lineup of panelists today to discuss what is probably the hottest topic of any that we will cover off in the week, really about our workforce and the way in which we need to adapt our workforce to the changing environment that we have from a business perspective, and how we deal with that within the regulatory framework within which we operate. So to get on with it, I just want to introduce the panelists, or have them introduce themselves, and we might start with Chris.
Thanks very much, John. My name is Chris Carmen. I'm the CEO and co-founder of WorkinAus. I also own a software development business called Sociable Tech, and we've created a technology and a platform to assist government, associations, industry and employers to ease the skill shortage through capacity building. I could go on, but I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Mardi.
Good afternoon. Thank you, John. My name is Mardi. So I work with Trilogy Hotels, which is a new hospitality company. We're a third-party hotel management operator. So I've spent my entire career in hotels and in HR, and this was an opportunity to do something a little bit different with Trilogy. So we will manage franchise hotels on behalf of a various set of owners, which gives us the opportunity to work across different brands. And with a real focus on ensuring hotel performance. We've got a lot of bespoke modelling that we do for each hotel to drive that performance. And I'm the Chief People Officer, so of course this is front and centre on my to-do list, is everything that we're talking about today.
Fantastic, thanks, Mardi. Jenny.
Yeah, hi, John. I've been in association management for over 40 years, but I started my association roles as the industrial officer for the Australian Hotels Association. So that therein started the link with hospitality and various roles, including running Restaurant and Catering Association before your illustrious long-term stint, John, and also Meetings and Events Australia and the National Tourism Alliance. But more relevantly to this session, I was 11 years doing all of the workplace-related employment, migration, skills roles, policy roles for the Australian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and I now do the policy for Accommodation Australia. So I'm back to the industry I started. So all good. Thanks.
Fantastic. Great to have you here, Jenny. Ayal.
Nice to meet everyone. My name is Ayal Steiner. I'm Sydney-based. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a startup called Even Better. Even Better is a gender pay gap management platform. Our mission is to basically help organizations understand why and where they have gender pay gaps and where they have opportunities to fix that. We basically just launched it this year, and some of our customers are in the hospitality business, and this is obviously a topic that's relevant for any industry. The hospitality industry is no different, and I've got some stats right in front of me from the Australian government about some of the gaps and inequalities that exist within the hospitality industry for our panel today.
Great, fantastic. Well, we look forward to covering those off. Thank you very much, Ayal. What I'll do is just start with a couple of little stats to get the ball rolling, just to give us a bit of a view as to where the industry's at, as I've done in the sessions that I've been involved in, at least. So I'll just try to... Oh dear. Hang on a second. I'll just try and get that up to where it should be. That's not working. Can you see anything on the screen? You can see the whole presentation, I'm guessing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Is there a presentation?
Yeah, it's not doing what it...
That's okay, John. If you just click from slide to slide, it should be okay. We can see it.
Okay. All right. Well, maybe just this. Well, see, it won't even. It's not even letting me do that. That's really bizarre. Okay.
What about the presentation format at the bottom of the screen that you just spoke to?
Yeah, I just did that, and it's giving me a percentage, which isn't very helpful. I'm really sorry about this. Maybe I can just try.
It's probably frozen. Maybe just refresh.
Let me give that one more try.
Doing things live. All good.
Yeah, isn't it great?
Usually it just relates to which screen it's trying to see.
Yeah, no. It is absolutely frozen.
Okay, well, you just have to.
We'll just have to march on. All right. I'm just going to try and rectify it in the background to see how we go. All right. So the key premise here is that we're in an environment where we've got the industry growing dramatically. So we're still growing to a point where we're about a third bigger than we were prior to COVID restrictions. And that growth is really off the charts. So that's over a third growth, 31% growth over a 3-year period. And that's really because consumers are wanting to spend more and more time in hospitality businesses and spending more of their hard-earned dollars in the hospitality businesses that they're frequenting. That means for us that we're in this environment where we've got more and more demands on the industry, and yet we are about 200,000 people less in our workforce this year than we were last year. And really that's been over a period where we've grown around about 6 or 7% in the year, yet we've reduced our workforce by 200,000 people. I put to you that that's not by design. It's because we simply haven't got the number of people that we need to do the work that we need done. And we haven't been able to source people in sufficient quantities to be able to have that workload being shared across our inherent workforce. If we look at what happened during the COVID pandemic restriction period, we lost 370,000 people out of the industry over that period. We also lost 2/3 of our businesses that have then morphed themselves into different businesses, but in so doing displaced all their staff. All of that's been going on in a period where the cost of that workforce has increased very significantly. So the cost of our workforce now is higher than it's ever been. 47% of turnover, particularly in the food and beverage part of the hospitality business, is now going out the door on wages. And if we take that environment and compare it to what's happening around the rest of the world, we now have by far the highest minimum hourly rate that we're paying in Australia. And that minimum hourly rate is growing at a pretty phenomenal rate. It's taking us to a point where over the last 3 years, we've had a 21% increase in our minimum rates. And that's without the overlay of any penalties, be they applied on an hourly basis for casual loadings, or be they based on a time of day or weekend rates and so on. So we have a very expensive workforce on an hourly basis. We have a demand for more people, and we also have a local training system that is not providing us with the amount of people that we need. So we are, of course, as always, forced to take staff from other places. Immigration is servicing not only skilled jobs across our sector, but also unskilled jobs through the likes of the Working Holiday Maker program or international students that are working across our industry. So we're in a very pressurised environment where there's a lot of attention, obviously, on the migration pathways and the extent to which were able to use those pathways. We brought in about 8,500 people that were sponsored into the accommodation and food services sector in the last financial year. Of those 8,500, somewhere around 3,500 were cooks or chefs, and then the balance in other skilled occupations. But that 8,500 in total over the financial year to June is servicing that need for about 200,000 people that we're still short. So we're nowhere near catching up to the amount of workforce that we need to service the demand. And that's servicing the demand as it is today, let alone the demand that moves into the future. And if you look at where the growth has been over the last 3 to 4 years, it's mainly been in dine-in in the food service side of accommodation and food service. So the food service side accounts for 61% of the workforce, and that part, the actual dine-in food service part of the industry, is the bit that's growing the fastest. So the piece that's growing the fastest is the most labour intensive, and yet we're in this environment where we are not keeping up with the demands of our workforce. So a pretty difficult sort of vision of where we're heading. I think the interesting part is that 200,000 short over 12 months has not resulted in a capacity constraint. That is, we haven't stopped serving people because we can't staff businesses in the main. We've somehow made good by engaging technology and using other ways to be able to provide the service that we need to provide to capture that additional demand. So that's my very quick version of where I think we're at right now and some of the future challenges, albeit unassisted by any moving parts or graphs, but it's a pretty bleak picture in terms of how we will look to service demand into the future. So what I want to do now is try and tease some of those things out and see how you feel about whether we're actually going to be able to meet those challenges. So Mardi, maybe I'll start with a question to you. So given the role that you're now in, and you've got obviously a range of different brands and properties that you're going to be looking after, all in that space of growth, how do you think you're going to be able to deal with those challenges of getting workforce to the extent you need them right now?
Thanks, John. Well, that was a great intro, and I am thoroughly depressed. So I'm going to pack up now and head home. Because whilst those numbers are obviously what's going on at a fairly high level, I think I'm seeing it a little bit differently. There's no doubt those challenges remain. And when you're talking about how we are managing to meet demand with the current workforce, how are we doing it? The way we've always done it, on the smell of an oily rag. And that's been a sort of a HR or a hospitalityism for years. For years in our industry, we have always worked with a very transient workforce, with a workforce that is potentially not on its career journey within our industry, and we've always worked with incredibly evolving guest needs. And I'm not so much from a restaurants and bars perspective, but certainly from an accommodation perspective, we're seeing that play out more and more at the moment. I think what we're looking at that has also changed is what our employees are actually wanting from us in the workforce. And that's been a bit new from a people perspective. So not only are we losing staff, the immigration and student numbers, and as you said, the training system that's pulling them through, but the number of youth or the youth employment numbers are on the rise. And that comes with a different set of challenges. We bring with it the generational change, but we bring with it the changes that came after COVID. So we are looking at workforces that are looking for true engagement. And I think that's been, we've had to hold up a bit of a mirror and go, what actually is that and how do we deliver it? We've got employees that are looking for genuine connection, transparent communication. Like, we can't run the same old programs that we ran. People are looking to build trust with us as the employers, and that trust and that proper and true engagement, that meaningful work that we can offer, those good, healthy conversations, that ability through those good conversations to understand the needs, whether it's flexibility, that's very big at the moment, a connection to ESG and environmental sustainability is huge right now. That's in our wheelhouse to offer. We just need to have those conversations. And what we're finding is by doing things that probably make us feel pretty good as well, having that good connection with the staff, building that trust, doing things in the environment, being able to offer flexibility. It's one of the things our industry is the best at. You cannot tell me that we can't offer flexibility, because that's what we are 24/7. But finding the right mix of the flexibility is what we need to do. So our focus across all of our brands, and no one's doing anything any differently, let me tell you, we're all in the same boat at the moment. But we're thinking that what we're looking at is that engagement piece creates retention. Retention creates productivity. So it hits a few of those marks. That's probably where, trying to make it sound less bleak, that there is actually genuine hope.
Yeah, thanks, Mardi. It's interesting, isn't it? I mean, it's constantly described as the war for talent, isn't it? And the question is whether we're actually got some employers that are winning the war and others that are losing, and whether we're just robbing Peter to pay Paul, so to speak, or whether it's a situation where we're actually growing the workforce as a whole, that is increasing the size of the pie so that we can cut it into even more pieces. But so obviously some amazing work that you're doing. Jenny, from a macro perspective, what do you think we are as an industry winning the war for talent?
Well, if the war is against other industries, I'd say no, not really. It's in terms of ourselves. I mean, we are bringing in people all the time, as Mardi says. There's a lot of transit nature in a lot of the workforce. It comes in and goes. I mean, whether it be the working holiday maker, international student part of the workforce, or even just the Australian students studying at uni who are picking up hospitality jobs. I mean, they are not seeing, as Mardi says, that our industry is a career, but in amongst all of that, though, there are a lot of people who stick. We had a national employment meeting of the accommodation sector today, and really the comment there was that the history, particularly in some of the big hotel groups, was after you get past the 18-month mark, people stick. People stick with the industry. They love the industry and they stay with it, and they might go through various stages of life changes, of dropping down or coming up or whatever, depending on what else is going on in their life. But at the end of the day, they love the industry and they stay with it. So certainly the data is increasingly showing that if we can get past that 6 to 18 month mark, that we actually can have people that stay with us for a long time. So and in terms of, I mean, the bleakness, I love Mardi calling you out on it, because really you started off by saying we are a growing industry. I mean, and so let's keep that in mind. In a way, the problem we have with workforce and getting the workforce we need is because customers continue to turn to our industry for what their needs are, whether it be staying, in a great resort or hotel, or eating out, or getting takeaway, or whatever it happens to be. Our industry is meeting their needs. It's just that because we are growing, we're struggling. So there is a silver lining to the cloud in terms of that. But I mean, we've got to maintain a mix. We've got to maintain the mix of keeping pressure on to try and get more trained people through, try and get more people through out of schools and into the workforce, into our workforce, staying with it, and also maintaining the pressure on government to keep access to migration avenues and international students and the like. And at the moment, I mean, all the pressure is on trying to cut down on the numbers of international students rather than up. So all of those things are creating issues for us, but we need to continue to maintain pressure on saying, no, all these things are important to us. We need that mix of workforce. We can't rely on just one source. We've got to tap into as many sources as possible.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Jenny. Chris, I might throw to you on that question particularly. I mean, obviously we've got this perfect storm on the migration front at the moment, where we seem to be fixating on capping student numbers, and then we've got all the concerns about the number of skilled migrants, and there's also pressure on working holiday makers for on that side as well. I really lament the plight of the regions right now. If we start to lose, we've already lost a lot of students that were studying at regional universities and regional vet providers. Potentially, we're going to start losing working holiday makers, because those coming from the UK can now stay for 3 years without going into the regions. So how does that picture look to you, Chris? I mean, you're right in this space.
Yeah.
How do you think we're faring in terms of attracting the right people through the migration system to service this industry specifically?
Yeah, I think I come from the lived experience as well of coming through the hospitality industry. That was the first job that I wanted to do when I came over here, even though my background was telecommunications and electrical. I actually loved hospitality, because the job that I had when I was in the UK was working behind the bar in the warehouse down in Maidstone. And it was just so good. And to Mardi's point about attitudes that are created in hospitality, it's just a get it done attitude that you can just do anything. And social skills, confidence coming out. I think that whenever you're employing someone that's had that hospitality background, they bring so much more to the role. It doesn't matter what industry they're in. So coming over here as a backpacker, that's the first thing I did, was go into hospitality. It was a welcoming industry for me to go into, and one that I would have stayed into, but again, I couldn't get sponsored in it. So it was no pathway for me to carry on. As you know, John, I went from there into electrical and telecommunications, and then started my own immigration law practice, and I've been practicing immigration law for about 20 years. And so I've seen the various different cycles that have gone through. And what the government's done with the migration review is great. It's really good to really look at and have a report done on the state of the system. And it has its own challenges of how we can actually implement some of those recommendations. But we do have a lot at our disposal in regards to pathways for individuals to come through. Labour agreements give us the mechanism with immigration law to be able to bring through individuals that are in occupations that might not be on a list. So there's always the talk of chefs coming on or going off a particular list, but the industry can actually put through its own labour agreement to be able to support some of those occupations for being on the list, being fast-tracked, and some of those that might traditionally not be seen as skilled, such as trade waiter. And to your point, John, as well, when we're looking at regional locations, again, if we're not getting those working holiday maker visas to go into, or visa holders to go into those locations, again, we're going to add fuel to the fire of the problem that we've already got. We're looking at the moment about 800,000 students here that are international. You've got 170,000 backpackers. We've got a significant amount of people that are here with temporary work rights within those visa classes that would be working within hospitality, but it's not really having a dent on an impact on those record unemployment levels. But to your point, I think that immigration is part of the solution, but you've got to look at workforce capacity as a whole. And to Mardi's point as well, it's about really selling the value proposition of the industry, and the Accommodation Association are going to do some fantastic things on that in the coming months. But from the employer perspective, it's really selling the value proposition of an employer, why you would choose to work at that particular location and what can be provided to you. Because we're in a candidate short market, And when I was growing up in the UK, there wasn't a lot of jobs, and there was a lot of people that wanted those jobs. So there was a lot of competition. When we look at it now, there's a lot of jobs and not so many people that are necessarily, vying for those. So again, candidates have a choice. So employers have to work harder. And that's where they've got to really be able to communicate that value proposition that they can actually bring, but also the industry as well, the positivities, and not just focus on adults, sell it young when they're in year 9, 10, 11, really get it out to people before they can even get behind a bar or get into a pub or a club, to really sell what the industry can do in regards to you leave school, you can get qualified, you can have that paid for you, not have any student debt, you can get paid straight away, you can be fast-tracked on a career to management, and you can be taken around the world with that particular job. But the thing on the war of talent is that they'll always come back, because our secret weapon is Australia, because it's the best place to live and work in the world. So then when you look at capacity building, it's looking at young people coming into the industry. It's people who are already in the industry or trying to attract workers from other industry, because we lose enough out of the hospitality industry to other industries that try and draw them back with the value proposition of flexibility. That's a great thing there. And then we've got to look at the underrepresented people that are in the community. And this is where diversity comes into it. Again, with huge amounts of refugees that come through. We've got returning service people. We've got workers with disability. So again, it's being able to enable employers to connect quickly and easily to those talent pools, because there's amazing organisations out there that are doing a huge service to those communities to connect them into jobs. And then also, obviously, the international piece is going to really be the biggest thing. This is the first time in Australia's history where the outgoing cohort in the workforce is far greater than the Australian cohort that's coming through. So we can't make enough Australians to service the need. But again, I think that when you look at the hospitality industry as a whole, especially for internationals, it really does offer opportunities for people to come through, be able to migrate to this country, to have rewarding careers long term, and also have a great impact on the skill shortage that we currently have. And immigration has always been a retention tool for many employers to be able to provide that consistency that sometimes the transient nature of the workforce can create.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I want to just come back to some of that diversity in the migrant cohort in a minute, but I just want to spend a bit of time on the regulatory environment before we get there. Yeah. So I just want to put a question to Mardi about that flexibility that you spoke of, Mardi, and you're absolutely right. We're in the box seat, aren't we? Because we can offer a very different environment. My question is, does the industrial environment allow us to offer the type of flexibility that, firstly, the potential employees want, but also that we want to provide?
Great question. We're preparing for budgets for next year at the moment across all of our properties. And one of the things we're looking at is how do we comply industrially, because there have been so many regulation changes with the government that we've got in at the moment. We really are shifting. Is quite the right word, but we feel like we're very much an employee-driven regulatory environment. We look at what's come in with psychosocial hazards, proactive duty of care, right to disconnect, what we're doing with fixed-term workers, what's the definition of a casual worker. All of these require a great deal of interpretation before they can be used within the workplace or to be compliant within the workplace. So that's a huge piece of work in itself. To the original question, does that allow us to be flexible? Well, we look at what's changed with flexible working rights requests. That has expanded. There are now more parties, and I'm all for that, that there are more parties that can ask for flexible working. I am such a huge advocate of hybrid working. I think for a number of people, billions of people through COVID, it was found to be a really productive way, can be a really productive way of working. It's not always going to work in the hospitality industry because hybrid working doesn't work for every single role. That's obvious. But flexible working requires potentially, look, nothing's impossible is what I like to say. And my managers and my general manager kind of hate that. But it does require a bit of a mindset shift sometimes, or a bit of a culture change sometimes. If we are absolutely that strapped for staff, we need to consider different ways of doing things. And if that means having a conversation, we had a kitchen in one of our old hotels down in Melbourne. The chefs all wanted to do 4-day working weeks. And so they had a big consultation process and they went through it, and the chefs all do 4 10-hour days instead of 5 7.6-hour days. And they're the happiest little group of people you can find. So there are big things that can be done. There are little things that can be done. And it really is, and I keep saying this, it falls to our leaders. And our leaders are so important when we look at where our skill gap is. It's yes, in frontline, it's definitely in leaders within the hospitality industry. We've grown them so fast. And all of this regulatory change, guess whose shoulders that sits on? It sits on their shoulders, which is where we need to be able to support them. I think you always need good legal advice. You always need a good immigration agent. So you always need your strong policies in a hotel to be able to support everything that's coming at you at the moment. I don't think it's going to change. I think we're going to get more regulation coming.
Yeah. No, and I'm going to throw to Ayal just to talk to us about the gender pay gap across hospitality and see how we're going on that front. And then I do want to circle back to whether some of these changes are actually what the potential employees are looking for. But Ayal, how are we going?
I just want to tie it back to 2 points. One that Mardi said around regulation, and one of the regulations that are coming down already here is that every business with more than 100 staff needs to report data to the government, to WGEA, which is the Workforce Gender Equality Agency. That is by itself, that reporting duty is already taxing for many businesses because it's not an easy process. But March this year was the first time that the WGEA, the Workforce Agency, basically published back the data. So I'm not sure that many businesses are even aware that their gender pay gap is now publicly available at the individual employer level, and everyone can see it. And I want to tie it back to what we discussed earlier, which is how to attract talent. And again, I'm not a hospitality business. I'm the odd one out in this panel. I'm a data technology person. We've got our own set of challenges in that industry. I'm sure that Dom can tell you about that. But by and large, every sector competes for talent. And in that sector, you compete for talent amongst the players in that sector. Looking at the hospitality sector, the more that it can present itself as an equal sector, the more that individual employers can present themselves as an equal payer, equal opportunity employer. It goes back to what Mardi said around connection, transparency, engagement that employees, especially the younger ones, are looking for. And employers that will do that well will probably be in a better position to acquire talent. The good news is for the hospitality industry is that the pay gap is not massive. It's currently sitting on an average of about 6 to 7%. When you compare that to other industries, that's relatively good. And it's because the workforce is generally diverse. You look at the total workforce, it's 48% male, 52% female. And when you take all the entire population that is reported in that to the government, and then slice it by quartiles, top earners, medium earners, low earners, and so on and so forth, every quarter is roughly is well balanced. Even the top earners, it's 54% male, 46% female. So things are pretty gender equalized. However, if you take managers, for example, which is a layer in the hospitality industry, on average, men earn 20,000. And I'm talking about executive, key management, senior management, other managers, all the category of managers. On average, men earn $20,000 a year more than women. So it shows you that while there's participation and opportunity to progress, when you slice and dice it, you still see that there's gaps in wages between men and women, especially in top positions. So, I mean, the premise for Even Better is that this is exactly the MRI machine that helps you understand where, why, and how to address gender pay gaps, because it's not just one number that describes your organization. You have to slice it into sub-cohorts. You have to really compare apples to apples and not apples with oranges. But again, that's why this process is so important.
Yeah.
So that's, in a nutshell, the state of the hospitality industry.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Anyone wanting to ask any questions around that or anything else we've dealt with? Anything you want to say on any of that, Chris?
Yeah, I might just follow on with Ayal, because I think where he's actually working is an amazing space as well. And that sort of data is so important. And it's similar to the way we've been addressing looking at workforce capacity issues. You've got to look at it via industry. You've got to look at it via location. You've got to look at it via the businesses that are actually working within those industries to really solve the problem. And to really also understand the problem as well. So I commend you, mate, for what you're doing, because I think it's absolutely brilliant. We're doing a bit with some of the other industries as well. So yeah, I really love what you're doing, mate.
Thank you. And the premise is, at the end of the day, gender equality, diversity, everyone had it up to here. Everyone has opinions.
Yeah.
We all like to categorize each other as you're too woke, you're too conservative, and to those extremes. But at the end of the day, when you look at data, it's very clear what you need to do. And that's where having a good handle on the data, having a good benchmarks to understand how you compare, it's not just about what my weight is, but actually how does my weight and height compare with other people. And that's why it's important to compare to put your data in context. And that's what we want to do. And we're very eager to work with companies in the hospitality space around that. But going back to what Mardi said, I think that especially with younger generations, they want connection, they want engagement, they want transparency, they want to feel like they work for an industry that is progressive and not conservative. And diversity, inclusion, equality, and equal opportunity are very important for younger generations. Should be, of course, it's important for everyone, but especially for someone coming in the industry, they want to know that all the doors are open and there's no glass ceilings or rigged games or boys clubs or girls clubs of any type.
Yeah,
John,
great.
I thought I might
Yep.
share a couple of things. As you know, we have what's called a Have Your Say board that everyone's invited to contribute to. And some of the points that are coming up this area I thought were useful to this conversation. One is this desperate plea for a more simplified regulatory environment where businesses are really struggling to understand what they're supposed to be doing when, and with a lot of interdependencies in changes, not quite knowing how to basically keep up and finding themselves in breach in certain environments without even realizing they are. So that's one topic. And the other is one that's again and again and again, is government's just not listening to industry. So, and that the policies are working against, not for, the industry. So just 2 points I thought might be interesting to discuss.
Yeah. Well, I think that's right. But the area that I wanted to come back to and sort of tease out a bit was some of the changes obviously being imposed by government, and particularly around this kind of obsession with full-time, 38 hours work a week, as opposed to more flexible working arrangements. And the extent to which that more permanent, more rigid employment structure is really what people that are working in our industry want, or people that would potentially be working in our industry want. I'm just not sure whether whose interest this sort of more rigid, more formal, full-time work engagement, whose interest is it in? to get more formalised work? And is it what people want? Jenny?
Yeah, look, I think it's a clash between the international push by labour organisations, so the unions globally, global unions, not just Australian unions, against what they call insecure work. So this mantra of insecure work is bad, and yet the way that insecure work is often defined is casual work is insecure work, and you go, well, at the end of the day, for our industry, many people, it's not only is it not insecure, it's also much more in keeping with what they want. And so the big argument about, you know, what the loading should be and the definition of casual, and although we, amongst others, brought the government back from really, I mean, the original casual proposals were pretty ridiculous and still very complex, even in the way that they were passed through. But you know, that idea that, you know, there shouldn't be casual employment, which was the starting point globally. I mean, so it's really really that push, you know, through the ACTU to a Labor government that's come from international union involved. You know, it's that mantra of no, it's all about having this security, if you like, job security. You know, you can get a bank loan, all that sort of stuff. Whereas, you know, in the reality, you know, so many people in our industry value the 25% casual loading, value the flexibility, adapted around being a student or you know, or you know, their personal or home commitments or whatever it happens to be. So I think it is trying to, and I think in the end we restored some of that balance in the argument, but we've got to understand it's not just happening here in Australia. It's that whole issue of, you know, what work should look like, you know, gets caught up even in that, you know, even worse internationally, informal workers, you know, like as, you know, that the idea that you don't even have a proper contract, you're just a day worker. You know, none of that happens in Australia. Australia's got the most regulated system in the world, and I mean, no one has industrial awards like we have. Nobody, you know, let alone, you know, anything else. So, in that sense, you know, we don't have some of those issues that they're trying to deal with globally, but yet we get the blowback, if you like. We get some of the mantras, you know, invading some of what's trying to be achieved here, and it invades the migration space as well. I mean, a lot of that pushback against temporary skilled migration is as much a global reckoning about it rather than the much more regulated system that's worked so well for Australia. I mean, Australia has had just on a soapbox of migration for a moment, because as you know, I'm always there on a soapbox of migration. But I mean, Australia has, for a Western developed country, has almost broken the back of the problem of the aging workforce that countries like Japan and others have had. I mean, we're still not there yet. We're still a long way to go, but it's the young skilled migrants that have come in through the temporary skilled and permanent skilled migration programs that have allowed people like me who are getting close to retirement to say, oh, okay, there is going to be someone there to look after me and pay my bills, you know, if I need it. So you know, which is the problem they've got in so many Western countries. So, yeah, I've got off the point a bit, but you can see it is a global. Yeah. The point is a global thing, not just a local thing, and some of that's invading our space.
But presumably, that whole global movement is okay for a lot of industries, you know, and they can work with the more full-time, more standard working arrangements. But we can't. So why is it that there's not an appreciation that there are industries like ours that need to have that flexibility and need to have a workforce that's able to be engaged when they want to be engaged? Because, as I said at a panel yesterday, unless we have customers that decide that they're all en masse going to have dinner at 2:00 in the afternoon, then we got nowhere to go. You know, the customers seem to understand it globally, that they want you to be there to serve them dinner, but they don't seem to get that means we've got to engage people casually and at different hours of the day. So is it just our industry that's coming off second best here?
I think we do get a lot of prejudice, particularly in bureaucracy. I don't think it's I think politicians are closer to it. than the bureaucracy. So it's the long tail of trying to work our way through policy mania. I mean, you know, Treasury officials who've done honours degrees in economics, who were sitting there making decisions, you know, on our industry, on how things should work, whether we should get support or not. And you go, no, you just don't get it, man. You just don't understand that our industry is employing people. It's labour intensive. It's not valued in the same way. If it's not being dug out of the ground or made, you know, and made in a factory, it's not real. And so you get that sort of bias against industries like us, which really permeates so many decisions that are made.
Which is ironic, really, because it's the 5th largest export that we have when you actually look down behind iron ore, coal, liquid petroleum gas, education, which might slip down now. You know, tourism is up there, and tourism obviously is underpinned by everyone that's working within travel, accommodation, hospitality. And so when you actually look at it, it's one of the, you know, biggest employers. And again, on the casual piece, you know, if I'm struggling to pay my bills, I want to get an extra job, and I need to have the flexibility of getting a casual job. Hospitality provides that. And I think that those are the sorts of things that need to be brought into the conversation, especially now when we're talking about going into an election with, you know, the cost of living crisis that we have on everyone's lips. Like, that is the support that should be given by the government to the hospitality industry.
Yeah.
Yes, it's very hard to achieve, though. I mean, I've had this plenty of times battling against bureaucracy about, you know, like, you know, oh, well, why have you dropped incentives? Why have you dropped traineeship incentives to the hospitality industry? No longer the only qualification in the whole of tourism that gets a support, other than the trades, obviously the cooking and the chefs does, is travel agents, and all the other tourism and hospitality traineeships no longer get any employer incentives. Oh, well, you don't need that. You don't need the qualifications. So, you know, in the industry, people just get the jobs, and you go, well, but at the end of the day, the more trained people are, the more productive they are, and going to force a disengagement between the training system and the industry. I think that's a really likely reaction. I mean, we're already seeing a drop off in that engagement, and I think it's going to increasingly be the case that the industry is going to say, oh, we don't need formal qualifications anymore. We'll just do our own thing. And the person who loses out mostly is the employee. They don't get the national qualifications they would like.
I think that's a really dangerous place for us to head, because it actually puts the onus back on the employer to train every single colleague in the business. And the two-pronged implication of that is, one, we don't have the skills or ability. We're not RTOs. When you talked about the traineeships and what was available for certificate 2s and 3s and the payment plans that went with those, were really a funnel and a breeding ground for colleagues in our industry. And by not having that, we've lost those RTOs, and they were the people that were the most qualified to be able to train in those basic skills. So now it falls on our leaders to do that, and we're not always then getting back to the compliance piece before. There's not just all the industrial legislation, but we've got all our WorkSafe legislation as well that we need to comply with. So it is that's particularly dangerous in that space, and I think we then suffer as an industry, and there are big brands, and been fortunate enough that we work with them, and I'm sitting in one of them now. I'm actually in a Pullman at the moment, and they have global teams of people that can come in and fill some of those gaps in the L&D space. But we've got a lot of smaller operators, and we've got unbranded hotels, we've got restaurants and catering businesses that don't have access to that support. It comes at a cost, so there's a further hindrance, I guess, on the viability of remaining a business in that situation.
You're absolutely right. You know, we really are putting a lot of obligations on the employer to upskill people at the moment. There's just not that pipeline of trainees and apprentices that we've referred to. There's also not a pipeline of people that have studied for 2 years at a TAFE college in a diploma or advanced diploma either. I mean, that has just dried up. And all of those people over years and years that came into our industry through that pathway they just don't exist. There's just not that pathway available to us.
I think there might be one small glimmer of hope, and we haven't talked about it yet, but the introduction of AI definitely has a place to play in our industry. We're seeing guest expectations change in not wanting as much contact, like keyless room entry, keyless check-in, which is starting to alleviate some of the needs on our manning and our staffing. But there's a damn sight more that we can be doing in an industry that is really, really tight on labour and really, really high on compliance, that can be replaced with AI.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, really good point. And I'm sorry we haven't got to the AI discussion, but it's really clear, right? If you look at those numbers in terms of the growth, it would have been nice if I had the graph to show you, but the growth's going like this, but the workforce numbers are staying static. We're getting the uplift in productivity that we wanted, but we're getting it for all the wrong reasons, because we can't find people. But we are finding ways to get the job done, and we're using tech, we're using AI, we're using everything we can get our hands on to actually still provide the offering to the guests. Now, I just want to segue for 1 minute back to something that we started almost to have a discussion on, which is one of my passion points, which is around cooks and chefs again. I mean, the capacity of people that have been brought into this country through our migration program to influence the output of hospitality businesses is extraordinary. We wouldn't have a hospitality industry today that has incredible quality Thai food, incredible quality Japanese food, and every other cuisine, Italian, Chinese, you name it, without the cooks and chefs that we've brought in through the migration program. What happens if we get this environment where we start really reducing the numbers of trained cooks and chefs that we bring into the country? How does our industry look at the back end of that? Chris, what do you reckon?
That's going to give me nightmares, I think. I was having this amazing conversation yesterday with the general manager of a couple of venues that was in just south of Port Macquarie, and he was saying that they couldn't find anyone locally. He brought in 2 chefs, one from Bahrain and one from Sri Lanka, and they'd been around the world. Cooking in 4 or 5-star hotels, restaurants, everywhere, Europe, Italy, Asia, and he was saying it's amazing. People actually choose the venue now because of the quality of food, and like you were saying, the selection of food. And he's again wanting to have beautiful Indian dishes, and they're wanting to do an Italian night, because again, that's the kind of environment they've been in. I think when we look at the outcomes from a migration perspective, and especially when you take chefs and cooks, people choose occupations for a migration outcome. So you may have people that have no previous experience in hospitality, but they choose it as a way of coming into the country. And after 5 years, when they get the permanent residency, they'll leave hospitality, or they'll leave their chefing role, and they'll go into another role. And it's kind of a cycle that goes on. You've still got to be able to produce those people that will come in and undertake those roles for that period of time. But we've also got to look at other alternatives where we can actually look at identifying the skill sets overseas, where they're actually already chefs and they've already spent periods of time at that highest level, and make it, I don't want to say easier, but we do need to make it easier. But we still need to verify their abilities, their experiences, but make it easier for employers to connect with them, and then be able to have overseas talent pools of individuals that really do meet the requirements of Australian employers, that can be drawn from where we can't find them locally, whether that's as students that are undertaking their qualifications here, or whether it's highly skilled Australians that are looking for opportunities, and be able to bring them in. Because the outcomes for people that are coming into Australia already from the hospitality backgrounds that are working as chefs, that are coming in as chefs and get permanent residency as chefs, especially in regional areas, they're staying in those roles and they're staying in those locations. So there's really good outcomes, especially from regional Australia, from looking at those sorts of programs. The Working Holiday Maker Visa program, we've got to look at it and support it in any way possibly we can. And especially as well, recognising out of metropolitan areas as regional areas, and anyone that is going to work on a Working Holiday Maker Visa outside of the free trade agreement from the UK in those regional areas in hospitality should be able to get their second year Working Holiday Maker Visa, so that we can really keep those Working Holiday Maker Visa holders in the system going out into those regional locations for periods of time. But again, it still gives that transient nature to the workforce. I think really for the government, they really need to support those an industry labour agreement whilst they're working through the migration strategy and what that's going to look like in the future. So the industry has the ability to then continue someone's employment and try and make that a relatively straightforward and cost-effective process to do it. And that will give consistency in the workforce, especially in those remote and regional areas that it's going to be reliant. And that's not just in hospitality. When we're working across all of the industries, it's the same across all the industries.
Yeah, exactly right. Dominique, have we got anything else from the floor? Any other?
Yes, we have a question from someone who says, I am struggling to secure a new job in the industry after earning a degree in the industry and enough history of experience. Trilogy has new opportunities and I'm currently on your site now. How can you help? I tried to go over migration lawyers with the edge of having my entire family in the industry. Most company sites honestly are not that updated. Can you share any encounters as such?
Sounds like you've got a live one there, Marty.
Exactly.
Fabulous. Okay, just share my details. We'll sort it out. Nothing's impossible. We do this. We get a lot of these inquiries in our hotels. And one of the points I made before is we've got an immigration company that we use that are very familiar with our terms and conditions of employment and the different roles that we have across our hotels. So I'm more than happy offline to reach out and have a conversation with that colleague and see if we can find them some work.
Fantastic.
Any more?
That's great. Yes. Anyone else out there, give Marty a call.
Yeah, so we've got another similar one, which was which are the kind of job apps and third-party companies that are the best to go to for hiring in the industry?
Yeah, that's probably actually a better question that probably should answer seriously rather than just recruiting for staff on this panel. I think it's difficult to find the right way. And Chris, you've got a whole structure there, so probably connect with Chris would be my first port of call. But there are a couple of hospitality.
Sorry, Marty, this is domestic questions, as in, if you're looking for a job in the industry, who would be the best third party, who would be the best, what would be the best platform?
Should we search for jobs on Seek or LinkedIn?
Seek and LinkedIn. I was just pulling Seek number statistics actually the other day, and the volume of Seek adverts across the hospitality industry has decreased in different areas, so year on year. So we've probably dropped about 25% in our ad volumes for the hospitality industry, but we've probably increased about 20% in candidate applications. Now, bearing in mind those two lines were about that far apart last year, so they're just getting a little bit closer together now. But Seek.com, we talked about it just this morning with the hotels. That's where all our jobs go. And LinkedIn, if you're seeing it double up and appear on that site as well. As for who's reputable, I mean, your big brands, obviously, but I don't want to discourage from any operator that's out there at the moment.
Yeah, that's great.
I might just add to that as well. We've
an ad for WorkinAus, is it?
Yeah. Well, the whole premise behind it as well is to actually give a bit of the ability for employers to better sell their value proposition, utilizing video, and also indicating which talent pools that they are open to employing. So again, if they're open to international talent or not, and giving the confidence for internationals to apply to those roles. And the technology that we built out is more than just a job board. It then features in a lot of the immigration tools that employers need to streamline the process for labour market testing. So again, when you're posting the platform, it again meets all those requirements, and also brings through an API to Home Affairs database to be able to do worker rights checks in the back end of the system on the same platform.
Sounds like a showcase, Chris, going on here.
So good, isn't it? And then,
It was funny during night hospitality, just FYI.
yeah. And I would say watch this space, because the industry are doing good things. And, you know, again, we'll see.
There's a major platform planned to be launched within the next 6 months that is going to be a careers, training, jobs platform for the whole of tourism and hospitality, and all of our members are on board with that, but also all the other accommodation and other industry associations across all of hospitality are involved in that. So yeah, look, there's plenty of exciting things coming, but that's about also selling the careers. That's not just about listing the jobs. It's also about how do we better profile the industry to school students, parents, everyone else. You know, it's about all of that.
Indeed.
100%.
I think we're up to time, everybody. Thank you for all of your comments. We've traversed a lot of ground, from regulatory environments, from an industrial relations, employment perspective to migration, and started to solve some of the vexing questions about how we are going to find currently 200,000 people. Extraordinary. Thanks for all your input, and thanks for a great discussion.
John.
Thanks very much, guys.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Take
Bye.
care.